Hey guys, I'm Val. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a build that I really enjoy. I haven't been able to play Source since the level 25 beta and feel like I've missed out. So I'm playing Blizzard. Really good build. It kind of reminds me of the Druid Pulverized build. You could start it at early levels and it carries you into the end game. I think Blizzard is actually stronger in the end game though. It's versatile. You can run it through the whole game. It's good for all content. I am using a few uniques in this build, but none of them are uber uniques. I'll potentially make a uber unique build later on. For the abilities, my first skill is Teleport. This is our source of Unstoppable. It also triggers T-Bot's Will. After teleporting, you gain 30% damage reduction. It also will add the lightning damage source for your Talrasha's unique aspect, and it's great for movement. The next ability is Frost Nova. Killing enemies frozen by Frost Nova reduces its cooldown by 1 second, up to 4 seconds. It is our manual application of the vulnerable debuff. So basically, when you want to do more damage, you want to use Frost Nova. It will freeze enemies and make them vulnerable, multiplying our damage significantly. The next ability is Flame Shield. Engulf yourself in flames for 2 seconds, burning surrounding enemies. This is not really used for damage. While Flame Shield is active, you are immune. This means you cannot take damage from any source. Flame Shield grants 25% movement speed while active, and you also gain 25% mana cost reduction. And for our ultimate, I'm using Deep Freeze. In this build, Deep Freeze will be doing a lot more damage, and it also resets all your cooldowns, which is all your other abilities. You can also cancel Deep Freeze whenever needed by casting it again. The next ability is Lightning Spear. I actually removed the modifiers. I only have 1 point into this. It's only used for another way to apply vulnerable in my opinion, and it also stacks the Talrasha's unique aspect. Then our main ability, Blizzard. Blizzard starts with a high lucky hit chance, which helps with chilling and freezing enemies and applying other forms of debuffs. Blizzard deals 25% increased damage to frozen enemies, and Blizzard's duration is increased by 4 seconds. For the enchantments, we're using Frozen Orb enchantment. Whenever you cast a non-basic skill, you have a 30% chance to launch a Frozen Orb. This is our third way to apply vulnerable, and this will be procced off of all of our abilities. We are not using a basic. The next enchantment is Firebolt. This allows all our skills to apply a burning effect, which increases our damage through the skill tree, Paragon, and Glyphs. For the aspects, I'm using Snow Guards on the helm. While within your own Blizzard and for 3 seconds after leaving it, you take up to 25% less damage. Juggernauts for the chest. This helps you hit your armor cap. I'm going to adjust these and try out a tanky Blizzard build later on. Conceited for the gloves, you deal up to 25% increased damage while you have a barrier, which all our defensives and our ultimate give us a barrier. T-Bolt's Will, you deal up to 40% increased damage while unstoppable. We trigger this by using our teleport. For the boots, I'm using Isu's Heirloom. Your critical strike chance is increased by up to 30% of your movement speed bonus. This is essentially a buff to our critical strike chance at all times, and the boots also have really good stats. For the main hand, I'm using Frozen Tundra. While Deep Freeze is active, exploding ice spikes form in the area. This causes your Deep Freeze to do insane amounts of damage, and your ice spikes have a 50% increased explosion radius. This is one of the 3 ways we have ice spikes put in this build. And then for the offhand, I'm using Storm Swell. You deal up to 30% increased damage to vulnerable enemies while you have a barrier. This might change in upcoming builds. I think it just requires too much, even though you will always have barriers. The vulnerable is a little bit different. And for the rings, I'm using the unique Blue Rose. Damaging an enemy has up to 30% chance to form an exploding ice spike. So this is a second way we get ice spikes to activate, and Blizzard has a really high lucky hit chance. For the second ring, I'm using Talrasha's Iridescent Loop. For each type of elemental damage you deal, you gain up to 15% increased damage for 4 seconds. So that's fire, cold, and lightning. It's gonna stack up to 45%. As long as you're damaging an enemy, which you could always just leave a Blizzard behind as you're moving on, you'll have 45% damage at all times. And for the amulet, I'm using the Glacial aspect. When you cast Blizzard, it will periodically spawn exploding ice spikes, and Blizzard is our main attack. Your ice spikes deal 23% increased damage to frozen enemies. For your construct, we are using Flash of Adrenaline, Duration Support, Tactical Support, Safeguard Support. If you have Genesis, it would replace Safeguard. Next, we're using Tempest with Resource Support, Efficiency Support, and Arcing Support. You could replace Arcing with Evernight. For the skill tree, I have 2 points in Firebolt. We're not going to use a basic. This is just so we can move on to the core skills. 1 point of Frozen Orb, Enhanced, and Greater Frozen Orb. 3 points into Potent Warding. These points can be moved later on after you max out your resistances. In the defensive skills, we're going to put 1 point of Flame Shield, Enhanced, and Mystical Flame Shield. 1 point of Teleport, Enhanced, and Shimmering Teleport. 3 points into Glass Cannon. 1 point into Frost Nova, Enhanced, and Mystical Frost Nova. And then 1 point into Elemental Attunement. This just has a chance to reset our defensive skills, and it will proc pretty often, even with 1 point. In the Conjuration skills, 1 point into Align the Elements, 1 point into Mana Shield, and 3 points into Protection. I actually adjusted these points. I'm only going to put 1 point of Lightning Spear. This is all you need. The modifiers really don't matter. I ended up taking the 2 points from Lightning Spear and putting them into Mana Shield, max it out. In the Mastery skills, we're going to be putting 3 points into Icy Veil. We're going to be maxing out Blizzard, 1 point into Enhanced and Mage's Blizzard, 1 point into Inner Flames, and 3 points into Devouring Blaze. Devouring Blaze is going to be a huge buff to our damage along with the key pass. For the ultimate skills, 3 points into Permafrost, 3 points into Hoarfrost, and 3 points into Icy Touch, 1 point into Deep Freeze, Prime Deep Freeze, and Supreme Deep Freeze. The amount of utility this 1 point into Supreme Deep Freeze gives you is insane. You could use your ultimate as a reset, use all your cooldowns, reset it, use them all, and then reset it again, just keep going. Or you could use it defensively and hold on to it. Next, 1 point to Fiery Surge. This will help your mana regen, but for the most part, your cooldowns will maintain your mana for you. 1 point to Endless Fire. It's just required to get to Warmth. 3 points into Warmth. Every 1 second, you heal for 0.9% of your maximum life. And then for the key passive, we have Isu's Ferocity. Your fire critical strike damage is increased by 25% against enemies above 50% life. Your fire critical strike chance is increased by 5% against enemies below 50% life. For my understanding, this works for all skill types at the moment. It's bugged. If that changes, I'll keep the guide updated. Anyway, here's a tier 100 Nightmare Vault, just so you guys get an idea of how the build plays. And as you can see, as you're doing damage, all your buffs reset and will stay on. Basically, all your glyphs refresh and are almost permanent. Same with the unique aspects. For the Paragon, we're going to go to the right. We're going to grab the damage, and then we're going to take the left side as well for the resistant life. The glyph's going to be Winter. Whenever you chill or freeze an enemy, you deal 3% increased cold damage for 10 seconds, up to 15% damage. As long as you're attacking or using your abilities, this buff will refresh itself. And and this glyph also buffs for resistance and damage. Then the next board is going to be Enchantment Master. We're going to go up and grab Elementalist for more non-physical damage and extra life. Our glyph's going to be Elementalist as well. This is another spot we can buff our damage and resistances in. Dealing fire, cold, or lightning damage to an enemy increases all damage you deal to them by 5% for 10 seconds, stacking once per element. So this gives you another 15% increased damage at all times as long as you're using your abilities and attacking enemies. We're going to grab more damage on the way out. The next board is going to be Frigid Fate. We do take the legendary node. You deal bonus damage to vulnerable enemies equal to 10% of the total amount of your bonus damage with cold. I still need to work on capping this out. Then we're going to get the vulnerable damage on the board. Our glyph is going to be Stalagmite. Your ice spikes gain 10% critical strike chance, and we're going to try to buff this as much as possible. The next board is going to be Icefall. We do take the legendary node. Your frost skills deal 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. This bonus is doubled if the enemy is also frozen. And the glyph is going to be Control. You deal 10% increased damage to slowed or chilled enemies, or instead 20% increased damage to stunned or frozen enemies. And this glyph also buffs our damage to crowd controlled enemies. The next board is going to be Burning Instinct. We do not take the legendary node. The glyph is going to be Destruction. We're going to grab some damage reduction to burning enemies here. Next, we're going to go out the right to the Searing Heat board, and the glyph's going to be Torch. You deal 2% increased damage per nearby burning enemy, and this maxes out at 12%, which will be up at most times. Then we're going to go back to the Icefall board, go out the right side to the Ceaseless Conduit board, and our glyph is going to be Territorial. We're going to grab this for extra damage reduction. You gain 15% damage reduction against close enemies, and it also increases your damage to close enemies. So I thought I'm going to start doing build reviews with my opinions, pros and cons. So this build's really strong. It carries you to endgame and it keeps on getting stronger. It reminds me of the Pulverized Druid, but it actually ends up stronger in the endgame. I don't know if it's S tier. I don't really like ranking builds unless I'm sure. And I'm pretty new to Sorceress, but you could do any content with this build. That includes Uber Lilith, Duriel, anything. If anything, the builds might be a little squishy, but you could fix that with minor adjustments. Changing a glyph, moving a couple points, better gear. Really not that big of a deal. Blizzard's really good. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys have any questions or feedback, I'll answer you down below in the comments section. I'll also post a link to this build. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your support. I'll see you guys next time.